Hello there, my RPG lovers, and welcome to another video. The Blood of Dawnwalker is an upcoming open-world action RPG developed by Rebel Wolf Studio. This studio has former developers of The Witcher 3, and this becomes very obvious once you take a deeper look at some of the major and minor features of this game. UI elements look very similar, dialogue options as well, and even the prologue area is designed similar to White Orchard from The Witcher 3, from all that I could tell at least. So I'm really excited to try this game out, and we won't have to wait for long for that, because it's releasing on September 3rd. I'm still not sure if I'll be able to get a review key for this game, but I'm going to play it regardless and make a review about it. In the meantime, I wanted to inform myself as much as possible about the game and make this video. I gathered all the important info about this game from various internet sources, so I'm going to talk about all major features of the Dawnwalker, as well as give you my opinions and concerns for some of these features. So let's jump right in.
Oh, I'll enjoy killing you.
The Blood of the Dawnwalker is a narrative-driven dark fantasy RPG, if that wasn't obvious already. The game is set in 14th century, in some secluded region of Carpathian Mountains. There was a plague that decimated the human population, and human rulers proved to be too weak to control the situation. A very powerful vampire called Brancis used the situation to his advantage and conquered the valley. He then separated the valley into 3 different regions and gave them to his 3 vampiric officers. Ambrose, the youngest officer, is stockpiling blood and managing the draining dungeons. Humans in this world are supposed to pay a blood tax to vampires every now and then. The second officer is called Becker, and he's operating an alcohol distillery. Xantia is the third officer, and she's creating the Blood Guards, which are elite soldiers of the vampiric regime. Those will be some very important characters for the story. You play as a young guy called Cohen, a simple peasant boy who is helping his family to survive. When he turned into a Dawnwalker, his life turned upside down. He's a normal human during the day and a vampire by night. After his family gets kidnapped by Brancis, his main goal is to try and save them in time. That will be the general gist of the main story, and pretty much everything we know about it so far. The game seems to have some amazing looking cutscenes and presentation for the story. But to be honest, I'm still not convinced if the story is going to be that good in this game, but it certainly has everything it needs to be good. Like I said, the presentation looks awesome, we can hear some great voice acting, and some of these characters seem very interesting. But I would need to learn much more about these characters, the main story, and the lore in order to judge it properly. I like the vampire fantasy as much as the next guy, but I'm really not sure if I like when the whole game is based on this premise. It's not like we didn't have some amazing vampire RPGs, but you can pretty much count them on one hand. That being said, I wouldn't really care about this if the story and the game turns out to be well written and interesting in general. And from everything that we could see so far, that definitely seems to be the case. The majority of the dialogue scenes that I managed to see have a lot of options, which means that we can probably learn a lot about these characters, the story, and the lore. And it seems like we can make some very impactful story decisions, which will have meaningful consequences. They said that the game is not linear, and that we have multiple ways to complete our mission. Speaking of meaningful decisions and consequences, your actions and even your inactions will impact the main story quite a bit. That's because the Dawnwalker puts a huge emphasis on the time mechanic. Each quest or activity that you do or gaining new abilities will progress the time meter in the game. For example, your main quest for saving your family is limited to 30 days and 30 nights. One of the earlier quests in the prologue is supposed to teach you how all of this works. I love the fact that you can simply ignore this and just face the consequences of your actions, because the game doesn't end there. They said the game is around 30 to 40 hours long, so it's not a short game by any means. The thing is, there is no actual time clock that will measure the amount of time you spent playing. That's not how it works. You are free to move around and explore the open world without affecting the time mechanic, which means the actual exploration is identical to other similar RPGs. But whenever you decide to do something specific, like completing a quest or progressing your character with new skills, the time meter moves a couple of spots. New opportunities should be available when this happens, while others will disappear forever. At least that's how the trailer describes it. I assume this means we'll have some specific quests depending on the time mechanic, and some of them are time sensitive as well, so we can completely miss them. I think that's pretty cool if true. However, I'm not completely convinced when it comes to this time mechanic. I don't like how it sounds in general, but that's because I'm not a huge fan of time limitations in RPGs, at least not to this extent. I actually like when some quests have this mechanic because they can make them more exciting and more meaningful. But it's yet to be seen how a fully fledged RPG feels to play when you have this time-sensitive mechanic on top of the main story. I'm totally open for changing my mind about this, and I will be first one to praise it if it turns out to be good. That's yet to be seen, but for now, I have to say that I don't like how the time mechanic sounds because it can potentially create a lot of needless frustrations. Not so much when it comes to the main story, but the gameplay could suffer the most because of this. Listen, I have no idea what I'm talking about until I get to play the game for myself, so I'll reserve my judgment until then. Now let's talk about the gameplay. Dawnwalker features a third-person action gameplay with 3 skill trees for making a unique playstyle. The melee combat is pretty much mandatory, no matter which playstyle you decide to go for, so let's start there. You'll be able to use at least 3 different types of melee weapons: short swords, long swords, and great swords, as well as your vampire claws, but those are reserved for the nighttime and the Vampirism skill tree. We'll get to that soon. There is a stamina system as well, and there seems to be a lot of options for quickly regaining your stamina in combat. This combat system has directional attacks, which can put an interesting twist on the gameplay. But this can also be completely optional, because you can get a special perk in the skill tree for simplifying the melee combat system. Omnidirectional combat, as the game calls it, will allow you to automatically select the best attack and a block without the need to worry about directions, for everything in combat except unblockable attacks that need to be dodged. I think I'll definitely stick with the directional combat and see how that works, because the alternative sounds way too streamlined in my opinion. The difficulty you choose should impact the overall experience of the combat quite a bit, regardless if you choose to use directional combat or not. But the omnidirectional perk definitely sounds like another difficulty option that you can simply turn off and make the combat a lot easier. Maybe I'm completely wrong about this, I have no idea. That's just how it sounds to me. That being said, I don't think the combat looks amazing, so turning off one of its biggest features like directional attacks and blocks could potentially make it way less engaging and probably less fun. All of these are just my assumptions, of course. Directional combat certainly looks very interesting and something that I really want to try out. There are 3 different difficulties to choose, and fair difficulty is the default. The hardest difficulty will turn off pointers for directional attacks, amongst other things, but this can also be done in the options menu regardless of the difficulty setting. Speaking of which, there are many options in that menu for controlling the gameplay. So if you don't like how something works, there is a high chance that you can tweak it in this option menu. I'm not sure how impactful these options are, but I assume they're going to be very helpful. I think the action combat looks passable for an open world RPG, and directional mechanics could be really fun to master, especially at higher difficulties. But the real meat of the combat are active and passive skills you can get from 3 unique skill trees. We already started talking about melee and swords, so let's talk about Swordmaster skill tree first. As the name would suggest, this skill tree is focused on the sword play, which is basically your typical melee RPG playstyle. There are no restrictions for the skills you can get from the Swordmastery, meaning that you can use swords both during the daytime and the nighttime. The actual skills you can get from Swordmastery seem really fun to use, and they'll reward good timing and positioning in combat. The skills on the right side of the tree are active abilities, while the left side is reserved for passive abilities. And right at the end of each skill tree you can choose one ultimate skill, which is really powerful. But you can only choose to have one from each skill tree. One of the first skills in the Swordmastery is your typical stun skill, then you can get an AoE sword swing, a charge ability that's also a stun, and so on. There's a very cool ability deeper in the skill tree, which allows you to decapitate enemies, which sounds really cool and brutal. As for those ultimate skills, one of them is called the Last Stand, which will increase your weapon damage by 1500% when your health drops below 30%, I believe. Another ultimate skill from the skill tree will reset your active ability cooldowns. So overall, this skill tree seems like a no-brainer for everyone who plans to play a pure melee build. By the way, I have to give a huge shout out to my buddy Wolfheart FPS for all of this info about skill trees in one of his videos. He made a great video about this topic where he covered everything in greater depth. It's worth pointing out that you have to invest a certain amount of skill points into a single skill tree in order to unlock more skills. You have some flexibility when it comes to investing skill points, and you can mix it up a little bit, especially for the beginner skills. but it seems like you will need to commit to a single skill tree in order to start unlocking those stronger skills. The Omni attack and block that I mentioned before, which allows you to automatically use best attacks and blocks without using the directional combat, is also a perk in this skill tree. I believe it's one of the earliest perks you can get, so that's worth knowing as well if you find directional combat annoying. There is no doubt in my mind that I'll go for this skill tree on my first playthrough of the game. Now, even though you can take a look at all of the skills in the menu whenever you like, you can't just get them by opening the menu. Instead, you have to find these shrines in the open world before you can invest skill points. I usually like features like this because I find it more immersive, like with Gothic games where you have to find trainers. I assume these shrines are plentiful on the map, and hopefully they will encourage exploration in general. But in order to even learn most of the skills, you need to find specific books in the game. Yet another feature which could potentially encourage the exploration, but it's yet to be seen how all of this comes together. Then we have a pretty unique skill tree called Witchcraft, which is focused on casting magic during the day. Yeah, a lot of these active skills in the Witchcraft skill tree can only be cast during the daytime, which is interesting. For example, there is a skill for talking with the dead, which reminds me of a particular quest from The Witcher 3 with Yennefer. That's more of a utility skill, it seems, but let's take a look at some of the active skills from the Witchcraft. One of the earliest skills you can get has a damage over time effect, and it literally burns enemies' blood inside of them, which sounds really epic. Other skills can reflect the attack back at the attacker, there is a life-stealing skill, and so on. Life-stealing skills is something I really like in almost all RPGs. This particular skill in Dawnwalker has some crowd control effects as well. Another skill from the Witchcraft you can get will stun your enemies by summoning a bunch of ravens, which is really cool. Ultimate skills in the Witchcraft seem very powerful. One of them allows you to target 2 enemies at once with the first skill you use in combat. So I'm guessing this allows you to use any skill in the game and it will affect at least 2 enemies, but there is a chance I do not understand this properly. Another ultimate skill in the Witchcraft allows you to block 3 enemy attacks automatically. That sounds like a very powerful defensive ability, which can be useful for pretty much all builds in the game. But then again, you would need to go very deep into the skill tree in order to get it. And the third ultimate ability in the skill tree will reduce the cost of the next ability you cast. And that will be the general idea of the Witchcraft skill tree. Again, all of these skills can only be used during the daytime when you play as a human. But what about the nighttime? Well, we have Vampirism skills for that. Vampirism is the third skill tree in the game, which can only be used during the nighttime when you shapeshift into a vampire, or the Dawnwalker as the game calls it. The simplest form of fighting while being a vampire is your claws for melee damage, but this form also gives you some very cool utility abilities. You'll be able to climb easier and traverse the open world much faster when you turn into a wolf. On the other side, you need to drink human blood in order to heal yourself while being a vampire. Here's a little gameplay twist related to this playstyle. There is a mechanic called corruption, which will start increasing once you drink more human bloods. The thing is, you will need a certain amount of corruption to even unlock some powerful vampirism skills in the tree, but I would also assume that this can negatively affect your interactions with NPCs, when you have a higher corruption level, I mean. That's just me guessing how this works, but I would be surprised if corruption doesn't have any negative effects on the gameplay, dialogue, or even the main story in general. As for the skills, you can slow down the time, you have a stun ability, mind control that forces enemies to fight for you, some kind of an explosion ability, and so on. Interestingly enough, there is a death from above skill as well, which sounds like your typical Souls-like plunging attack, which can be instant death for weaker enemies. As for the strongest ultimate skills, one of them will give you lifesteal on attacks and temporary immortality upon taking a fatal blow. Second ultimate ability will increase your claws damage after you get more kills. And I believe Volhart also talked about another ultimate skill which is supposed to synergize with another skill you can get early on. So overall, this skill tree seems really cool in general. I'm honestly more interested in those utility spells like climbing walls and turning into a wolf. They also mentioned a very nice quality of life feature that will automatically switch your abilities and loadouts, so you don't have to set up your nighttime build as a vampire and your human abilities during the day all the time, as long as you do it once. Here's what has to be one of my biggest concerns about this game. The open world exploration seems very similar to The Witcher 3, and maybe even too similar. Don't get me wrong, I love The Witcher 3 in general, and I thought it was an amazing game, but the open world exploration was one of its biggest weaknesses, in my opinion. So I hope that Dawnwalker has a little bit more engaging open world to explore, but that's yet to be seen. They are promising a rewarding exploration in the open world, where you can find some unique items like different sets of armor. The valley is a big place open for exploration, and I just hope it's going to be fun, and not just wide and open for absolutely no reason. What's really cool about the main story, and the gameplay as a matter of fact, is that you can decide to storm Brancy's castle whenever you like, even the moment you step out of the prologue. That's something I certainly didn't expect to see, and I think it could be an amazing feature. I assume it's going to be extremely hard to pull it off on lower levels, but I'm sure that some people will find a way to do it. It's also very cool because it sounds like you can completely disregard the time mechanic as well, if you decide to do this. I can't wait to see how that actually works in the game. It definitely sounds like it could be an amazing feature, which gives you a great sense of freedom from the story and the gameplay perspective. There is also a simple crafting system in the game, but it seems like it's almost exclusively for consumable items, which can be used for enhancing some of your abilities or just healing yourself while you're in the human form. And that will be it, pretty much. That's all the major info I gathered about the game so far in order to bring you this video. Stay tuned for my review about the game and possibly some more videos about it, and tell me your opinion about the Blood of Dawnwalker in the comments below. Are you excited for this game or not? Let me know. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more content like this. And if you want to go a step further, consider supporting your boy by becoming a YouTube channel member or a Patreon. Huge thanks to all my current supporters, and I'll see ya in the next one.